Hello everyone, welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host Paula Taylor and this is episode 199. So today we are talking about the energetic architecture for the new earth. And just a note about why I'm using the term new earth, because I've been using the term 5D. I will continue to do that because it's a little bit of a shorthand for what we've kind of determined to call this shift of 3D to 5D. There's a bunch of episodes where I talk about something and the 5D. But the reason I'm changing my nomenclature, somebody said they liked that word the other day on TikTok. The reason I'm changing my wording here is because what we're talking about is physical and quantum. So 5D technically is not a physical space. 3D is our physical reality. 5D is like a quantum space beyond that. And then there's 70 and 90 and all the dimensions that people like to number. And my angelic guides don't really resonate with those numbers as much as just this idea of sort of what's physical and what's energetic, and what's quantum and what's energetic. And then there's the physical aspect of the energetic, as well as the more quantum aspect of the energetic. And Dolores Cannon is the one who coined the term New Earth, this idea that we were moving into this huge shift, which involves accessing more of our quantum bodies, more of those dimensional spaces beyond the 3D. So I'm using the term New Earth here because I actually think it's probably a more descriptive term. 5D sometimes implies that we're leaving the 3D. It's this idea of if we were really in the 5D, we wouldn't have physical bodies anymore. And we're talking about the energetic architecture of the body, physical and quantum body, as it's changing through this transition. So the new earth involves both shifts in our 3D physical body and the energy of our physical body, as well as shifts in the quantum. So I feel like that term kind of encompasses everything. It encompasses both the 3D and the 5D, because part of the challenge of this shift is that we're not leaving the physical. We're staying in physical bodies while expanding our energetic fields and expanding our access to quantum spaces beyond physical reality. And there are some really unique challenges in that transition that have never been done before, according to what I channel from the angelic guides. This has never been done before by any species. There are lots of species who have moved out of 3D bodies and into more light bodies. And eventually we will probably do that down the road. And we are moving more into the quantum while maintaining physical bodies than kind of any other species has ever done. And as usual, I'm just going to say about all of this, there's no encyclopedia where you can go and look this up. This is channeled information that will either resonate with you, it'll kind of feel true on some level, or it won't. And as usual, I will just tell you to take what resonates and leave what doesn't. There's a reason there's lots of different people saying lots of different things. It's always interesting how much things kind of line up, but we all have different ways of speaking. Some of us are channeling different beings. There are star beings that are channeling information. I'm channeling angelic information. So there's bound to be differences in kind of the interpretations of some of these things. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the nuance of New Earth or of the 5D, is like, it's not yes or no, all or nothing, black or white. And there is no way to really prove this scientifically until there is. Like, we're so far behind measuring the science of energy based on like where the metaphysics of this is going, that we don't really have time to wait for that. I think it's great that we're doing more of that. And I'm already like off in some other quantum dimension while they're just finally recognizing like, yes, we do have an energetic field. Yes, we do have toroidal fields. We do have these like donut fields, and the heart produces one of them. Guess what? There's many more. We're going to talk about that today. So I'm going to go back a little bit, and this is going to be a little bit of a repeat, especially for those of you in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary. And just before I forget, there is a lot more in-depth information and activations available in that space, and that is purposeful because there is some support around that. So if this information is calling to you and you want more depth on this and you want to access the activations that are going to go with these, probably this series of shows, I suggest checking it out. It's $22 a month. Most of us in there are introverts who are on a spiritual path. There is an opportunity to interact. There's no pressure to interact. Some people are there mostly for the activations and the bonus episodes of the podcast. Some people are there to build community, and there's space for all of that in there. And the link to that is always in the show notes. So I'm going to backtrack to around August of 2023 and talk about these archangel activations that I was channeling in then. And it's very interesting because this series of activations came through, and I talked about it, that the chakras were actually elongating. And then that sort of just went away. I hadn't heard anything. I hadn't channeled anything more on that until the last month or so. And now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, we were laying the foundation for this big shift that's happening now. And the big shift that's happening now is here to help us make more space in our energetic body and our physical body energetically so that we don't feel so overwhelmed. 2025 has been a year of shift and transition, and for a lot of us, it's been a year of overwhelm. I have been studying energy since I was 19. That is almost 30 years now. I have been professionally working with energy since 2003. That's a long time. I have never seen shifts like I have in the past couple of years. And at heart, I am an energy geek, an energy nerd. I have seen hundreds of people, and I've seen patterns over the years. That's what my first book was about, spiritual integration. It's about some of the patterns that I recognized and how to move this energy in a way that would give you more freedom, more clarity, expansion, and harmony. So now we are building on that, and we are moving into more of this spiritual awakening space, which is this literal shift in the architecture of our energetic bodies. And again, when I check in about this, this has never been done before. There have always been people accessing kind of spaces beyond what, quote unquote, like normal people access, advanced yogis and these spiritual ascetics who were kind of able to do things that seemed impossible in the physical. You can think about Jesus as one of those people who were able to heal, who were able to, levitate themselves, able to go without eating for long periods of time. Like, there's always been people connected to some of these more expanded quantum spaces. And there's never been a worldwide shift like this where it is accessible to everyone. You don't have to dedicate your life to studying energy. You don't have to live as a monk in a cave and meditate for 8 hours a day for this information to serve you. And in fact, we are moving into this service-oriented view of really being in community with each other and applying these gifts to each other rather than this kind of idea of, going up to the mountaintop by ourselves and just sort of living a life of quiet solitude. We're really being asked to bring this into community. And so that's one of the reasons I'm talking about this and sharing this information, because it's really important to help support us as we continue to shift. There's going to be a lot of momentum in 2026. And the last part of 2025 is really about, the way I said it to someone in a session this week was like, where are you pointing your rocket? Your rocket is going to take off in 2026. Do you want it to be pointed in the direction of more clarity, expansion, and harmony? Then you've got to do that with intention. And part of that is kind of moving through these shifts that are going to continue through the end of the year and probably into next year. This is like, again, this started in 2023. So this is kind of an overview. I don't have time to go into a lot of depth about any of this stuff. And I'm going to go back to a little bit of like some basic information just to kind of catch people up. And then again, I think this is going to become a series where we kind of talk a little bit more in depth about these new fields that are opening up. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit before this idea of the elongation of the chakras, just to talk about the chakras. So at this point, most people with any real interest in spirituality are familiar with the idea of the 7 main chakras, which comes out of the Hindu system, and it's something that we have sort of westernized, like many other things. And there've always been schools of thought that there are way more than 7 chakras. There are some thoughts that there's like every cell, there's 1 billion chakras in your body. And what I've been noticing, especially over this year, is that we can't really be complete working with just 7 chakras anymore. We have to be working with the 12 chakra system. And we'll talk a little bit about what each of those chakras are and what they do. And I will tell you that the way this started coming through to me was that I was practicing this Joe Dispenza meditation that he calls Blessing the Energy Centers, which is essentially a 7 chakra energy center meditation where you kind of move up through each of your chakras. And I realized as I was like adapting this to my practice that it wasn't complete with only 7 centers, that I really needed to use the 12 centers. And for me, I focus mostly on 11 of them. And the 12th one is a little bit like the frosting on the cake. And we'll talk about that when I talk more about kind of these elongation of these chakras and these fields that are opening up. But I just briefly wanted to go through the 12 chakras, give a little bit of a brief explanation about each of them, just so we're all kind of on the same page about that. Because honestly, I knew there was like a system that included more chakras than the 7 that are kind of based in the body. And I started discovering these through my own practice of this Blessing the Energy Centers meditation that I adapted and expanded on. There's a lot of versions of that in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary. If that calls to you, you want to start working with them more directly. But what I'm going to do is just kind of talk about each one of them, and then we'll talk about the elongation of this system and these toroidal fields, these toric fields that are coming in as these chakras become elongated. So in the 12 chakra system, the first chakra is called the Earth Star chakra, and it exists below the bottom of our feet. It's actually within the earth. This is our connection to the earth. This is our connection to what many of us call Mother Gaia. It's deeper than just grounding. Grounding kind of comes in at the root. It's like really being present and connected to this physical planet that we're on. And this chakra is more important than ever before, because one of the pitfalls of spiritual awakening, people use the word ascension. There's a reason I don't use that word, and I don't particularly enjoy that word, because ascension implies leaving. Ascension implies, like, if a plane is ascending, it's leaving the ground. We are not ascending, we are expanding. And part of the expansion is to be more present with the earth and more connected to the earth, and recognizing that the earth is a being, and regaining the respect and living in harmony with the earth the way that indigenous people once did. This is something that we're going to be heading back into as we transition into this new earth. So the Earth Star is that really strong connection to the earth. And we've got the root chakra, which is kind of at the perineum, or the base of the spine, sort of between the spine and, as in Kundalini, they'll say between your sex organs and your spine. I'm at the bottom of the pelvis, essentially. The root, to me, extends all the way down through the legs, through the feet. And then below the feet, that's when we're getting into the Earth Star. And we've looked at these chakras as sort of separate yet connected. They're sort of centers. I used to view them as kind of spheres that spun. I haven't seen them that way for a long time. To me, they're like their own fields almost, and now the fields are connected. But the more you can connect to the Earth Star, the more support you're going to have in your root. So we kind of build these as we move upward. So the root is at the bottom of the spine. It's sort of that physical survival. It's the tribal kind of idea of, I need to belong, I need to fit in, I need the resources I need to kind of, eat and have shelter, things like that. And we're going to talk more about survival when we kind of get into the fields. So the sacral chakra is below the belly button, kind of in the pelvis area. And these are, I'm sort of referencing, like I referenced the front of the body, like the belly button, but these are really centered within the body. And the energy, the central column, or what some people, where the Kundalini rises, I think it's Shoshana or something. I'm not sure what the Sanskrit word for that is. I just call it the central column. These chakras kind of run all the way up through the body. And then you've got this like central column of source energy. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And there's a lot of information coming through. I'm doing my best to make this concise and sort of an overview, But we're going to be delving into this more, whether it's in future shows, whether it's in a book, whether it's in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary. We're just kind of going over some things today. So the sacral chakra is your center of flow. It's kind of a watery center. It's linked to creativity, which we'll come back to. And it's sort of where we create, whether it's physically, if you have a womb space, or in the creative realm, it's where we flow from. Then we've got the solar plexus, which is just below the rib cage, kind of in the center of the belly. And the solar plexus is widely regarded as your center of kind of personal power. Sometimes they call it willpower. Who am I, and how do I stand strong in my own presence, in my own space? Your differentiation from source is kind of in that solar plexus. Then we've got the heart center, lots and lots of studies about the heart center. You can go to Heart Math and learn about the toric field that's generated from the heart center. We're going to talk more again about toric fields or toroidal fields. And the heart is the center of kind of unconditional love. Love of self, love of others, but like the unconditional love of all, this sort of opening of allowing yourself to be vulnerable, allowing yourself to be loved, to receive. The heart is a lot about receiving, which is really hard for people. Then we've got the throat, kind of in the center of the throat space. The throat is about expression. So your creativity is generated in the womb, and then it's expressed through the throat. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So speaking up for yourself, knowing your truth, knowing your purpose, all of that kind of centers in the throat. And we've got the third eye, which is always represented as kind of the center of the forehead, but I believe the third eye really sits in the third ventricle, which is in the brain, and it's linked to the pineal. This is why the third eye is associated with psi gifts or intuitive gifts, because your pineal gland is the physical mechanism that manifests those. So your third eye is sort of associated with this idea of clear vision, of seeing kind of beyond what your physical eyes can see, and seeing what comes through in spiritual reality. And then the crown at the top of the head used to be, I'm going to say used to be, still is connected to like oneness, connected to this kind of opening into remembering that you're a being of source energy. And the crown is the opening through which we expand into these higher chakras that we're going to talk about, that are linked to these other fields that are being opened. So above the crown, we have the causal, and you can look it up and people say, you know, it's this many inches or it's this many feet above the body. This is all an intuitive field to me. The causal chakra to me exists somewhere within the room I'm sitting in, above the top of my head. And when I find it, sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes it feels a little lower. I think the more expanded your field is, sometimes the further up you're going to find these extended chakras. And I think the more you work with them, the bigger the fields actually get. It's very interesting. I've been working with the causal field for a while now, and recognizing that, to me, the causal chakra is linked to all of your past human lives, all of your human incarnations. So when I find past life trauma, a lot of times it's held in the causal field. So we're talking about a chakra, but it's like a field that goes all the way around your body. And now it's sort of linked to the chakras within the body, and we'll get into that. So above the causal is the soul star, somewhere way up, like between here and the celestial realm, somewhere is the soul star. And the soul star is the center where all of your quantum origins are held. Like when people talk about their higher self, to me, the soul star is sort of it's the anchor point from which all of the different differentiations of your soul kind of differentiate out. So if you have memories of non-human lifetimes, angelic lifetimes, starseed lifetimes, or star origin lifetimes, elemental lifetimes, all of those things are sort of held in the field that is the soul star. And it's all the differentiations of your soul over all time and space, essentially, versus the causal, which is more human specific in my experience. So then above the soul star, we have the stellar gate. And here is where I had to do a little bit of interrogation about this, because what I've been saying, and if you're in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary, you've heard me say this, that the stellar gate is the gateway to the celestial realm. And I think that's not true for everyone. So the stellar gate is really the gateway to your realm of first origin. You can get to many realms through the stellar gate. So the stellar gate meaning like Stargate. So if I want to link to the Pleiadians, that's through the stellar gate. If I want to link to the Arcturians, that's through the stellar gate. The stellar gate is not specific to the celestial realm. For me, it often is, because that's my home. So when I'm going like home to my quantum origin, I just end up in the celestial realm, as opposed to somebody who is like more linked to, say, being an Arcturian, they end up in the Arcturian realm, or you end up in the Mintakan realm. And you can explore many different realms through this. But I think for most people, when you open the stellar gate, the first place you walk into is the place that feels most like home. All of us came from Source. That is our original home. And we have differentiated out, especially for the first time, or for the first time in our sort of accessible memory, to a place that feels really linked to us. So for me, that's the angelic realm or the celestial realm. For other people, that could be many other realms. So then the 12th chakra is the divine gate. And the divine gate is actually the direct link to the celestial realm. And that's where I had a little bit of confusion for myself, because my stellar opens into the celestial realm, and then my divine gate opens directly into Source, which is like the place I talk about where the seraphim are sort of holding the space. When Source decided to differentiate out, it differentiated out into the seraphim, or what we have termed the seraphim, into this first differentiation of just enough light to hold the space of Source. If you go into Source itself, it's very interesting. It's not actually light. It's pure consciousness, or the formless void. And we won't get too far. That's like a whole road we could go down. So the divine gate essentially opens either directly into Source, or I think for some people it's like into the celestial realm, which leads you back to Source. So those are the 12 chakras. So around August of 2023, I started offering these archangel activations. So they were channeled through from archangels. And what I realized was happening in these sound activations was that the 7 chakra system that I was working with at the time was elongating. So instead of having like the root, the sacral, the solar plexus, and the heart, there was one big long space from the root up to the heart. And then there was one big long space from the sacral up to the throat. And then there was one big long space from the solar plexus up to the third eye. And then there was one big long space from the heart up to the crown. And at that point, that's where I sort of stopped. The last portion of those activations was just to kind of like open the quantum space around the body, the auric field around the body, which has all of these different differentiations. And sometimes people get confused and they ask me, you know, why, like, you're talking about all these different energies and really everything is all Source or unconditional love. That is true in the quantum, but in the physical, there are different energies. That's why we're here, to experience these different energies, these differentiations of Source energy. At the root, everything is Source. And we are here to experience all these different types of energy, which is amazing and awesome in the true sense of the word, and sometimes a little bit scary, because in order to know what Source is, you have to know what Source is not. And part of this move into this new earth space is the way the angels put it is like, you all have gone much further than you needed to away from Source to figure out what Source isn't. It's time to start coming back towards Source. And sometimes we use the terms light and dark. That's a binary that exists in this physical that can make it a little more easily understood. None of these things are not without a lot of complexity and nuance. But you can think of like Source to us appears as light. It's very interesting, but when you go into it, it's not actually light. It's the formless void. It's the pure consciousness. But in the physical, we have explored different varieties of darkness in order to remember what light is really like. And so this transition sort of out of the density is a better word that I like versus darkness. We've gotten into some really dense spaces, and it's very obvious now. This is part of this move back, is like we've got to recognize the density and decide we don't want that anymore. We want to move into more expansion, into more clarity, into more harmony. There's a reason I use those words specifically. So I did that series of archangel activations, and again, then all of a sudden it was just like, and at the time it was very clear, like, we're preparing you for the shifts that are coming. And it was like, okay. And so then I just, like, they just went away, and I realized they were their own, this is their own, another branch of dimensional frequency expansion, which is the angelic light language, sound energy, quantum sound energy technique, and light language. I was going to say, so the DFE that I teach now, the 7 layers of DFE, comes straight from the seraphim realm. This other branch is called angelite, and it comes more from the archangels. And that's purposeful because the archangels are more familiar with the physical plane. I'm just realizing now as I'm saying this. The seraphim, sometimes people say, you can't channel seraphim, or you, like, I'm not going down that road. And I will say the seraphim, with very few exceptions, do not leave the celestial realm. They are there to hold the space of source. They are there to kind of surround the void that is source, that we view as light. The archangels do leave the celestial realm. And in fact, everyone has a guardian archangel. When we talk about guardian angels, it's generally an archangel with pretty much everyone I've worked with. So the archangels are very familiar with the physical energy of 3D reality. So I believe that that is why they have been channeling these angelite activations to help us, because this is supposed to help us in the physical realm so that we are not feeling so overwhelmed with this shift back toward source and out of density. So about 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I don't know what is time, I was in meditation. And what happens periodically, and I've talked about this before, is that my archangels will leave. They'll go, I talked through 2024, they were gone for a long time, repatterning, recoding this archangel net that I work with all the time, that's really made of seraphim light, of a seraphim body, wings. Well, seraphim don't really have wings, it's more like a net of light. So Archangel Michael had been gone again. And now I just trust, and it's usually like, you know, I got to work on something and you'll know when it's time. And a lot of times I talked about this, I think on the last show, this idea of when it's time for a big expansion, they will hold the space for me so I can expand out and figure out where I'm supposed to be going or what I'm supposed to be paying attention to, which is a lot like how I work with people here. They come in, they're looking for expansion. I'm holding a space so they sometimes it's like, oh, there's more space around me. I didn't realize that. So I was meditating the other day, and I was sort of reaching out to, I was like, what is this next expansion? You know, I'm getting tired of waiting. I'm tired of being in the liminal. And there was like an object there. And he said, you need to pay attention to this. And so then I kind of zoomed in on it in, you know, astrally or in my vision, and it was 3-Eye Atlas. And I hadn't said anything about 3-Eye Atlas. There's been lots of interesting theories about it. But essentially what Michael said is that it is a resonance or a frequency tuner and amplifier. And what I believe now is that there are a lot of different groups using it. Essentially, it's like a beacon. It's a transmitter. And there are different groups using it to transmit frequencies out to help humanity like in this shift. And so these angelic frequencies that I'm talking about, these archangel, angelite frequencies that are coming in and opening these new toroidal or toric fields, they're using 3-Eye Atlas to like beam these frequencies in. So they are actual physical frequencies, not necessarily frequencies that we can hear, although I think some people who are sensitive to sound will hear them as they get closer. They're not coming all the way to Earth, but 3-Eye Atlas will be at its closest point to us on December 19th. And so what came through, like, as soon as I realized this, I booked a few more of these archangel activations, and I realized that there were 12 specific frequencies coming in, aligning with the 12 chakras, and each one of these frequencies is opening these fields that I had already started to open, and now it's time to finish opening these fields. Now it's time to like build this stability in our field. And the way I always explain this is if you look at a skyscraper, like I grew up outside of Chicago, and the Sears Tower, which is now supposed to be called the Willis Tower, is very famous. You can actually see architecture going up the side of it. There's these X's that go up the side of it. So the taller your building, the more expanded your building, the more structure you need to support that expansion. This is true in the quantum. This is true in the energetic. That's why this episode is called Energetic Architecture. So these fields are building stability so that as we expand out, we have the structure to hold that expansion, and we're not top heavy. We're not ungrounded. We're still connected to the earth, but we still can access flow and support and safety because we are still mammals with nervous systems that are easily triggered into thinking they're not safe. So all of this is being done for us, or is being offered to us, so that we have more stability as we expand out. And I will tell you, there's a lot of relief since I've been working with these fields. Like, it's like, oh man, I've been trying to hold all of this space myself, and the fields are kind of holding it for me now. So we're going to talk about what each of the fields is and kind of where they exist in space. And then that's kind of all we're going to go into today, because again, this is like a huge information dump. And you might be sitting there still like, wait, there's 12 chakras, or what the heck is she talking about? Or 3-eye atlas? What do you mean? So let's talk about these fields. I'm going to give you kind of the name of the fields, and then in the future we may go more into depth about each one of them and what each one of them is doing. I'll do that a little bit, especially with the first field, because this is the field that a large portion of humanity is really struggling with right now. So the way, and I will just tell you that this information is, it's not static information, it's active. It's still coming to me. And so there may be nuances of shift in this as I move forward, and I just hold space and grace for that. So the best way to picture these, and it really works all the way down to like the base of this thing. So if you remember, I think every single person on earth has either had one of these or seen one of these, or at least seen a picture of the old play school toy that is a tower. So there's this white tower with a base, and then this center spire that goes up, and then there's these rings, these plastic rings that stack around, and they're wider at the bottom, and then they get narrower as they get to the top. Those are essentially these toroidal fields. However, you have to turn the thing upside down. So the base is at the top. These fields get wider as we go up into the quantum, narrower as we come down. However, we have the central column that comes down and connects to the Earth star. So the Earth star here is kind of your base of support. It's the foundation of your skyscraper. That's why it's so important. And the Earth star, each one of these fields kind of has a name. So the Earth star and the divine gate are kind of the foundation and the pinnacle, essentially, or the foundation and the pinnacle from up to down, depending on how you want to look at it. So they're not kind of, they're their own thing. They're not part of these toroidal fields. They're sort of like where we come from and where we arrive to. So the Earth star is presence. They've given me the name of each of these sort of fields. So the Earth star is its own field below the Earth. It's like the big foundation that goes down that allows your skyscraper to expand. And this is presence, like physical and energetic presence. So then we have, as I said before, the root chakra extending to the heart is now its own toroidal field. So if you're looking at your play school toy, you're now at the narrowest ring that's at the top, but we've flipped it, so it's really the bottom. So this first field is survival. I already mentioned this. It's called survival. And this is the field in which, if you've never done any nervous system healing, trauma healing, spiritual work at all, this is the primary field from which you are operating. This is where you're primarily present. Most people in survival are not present in the Earth star. They're not truly grounded, because the Earth star is what really grounds us and connects us to the Earth. They're sort of in this survival space of resources. You know, do I have enough resources? It's scarcity versus abundance. Do I have enough to eat? Do I have enough to live? Do I have shelter is the basic. And then it's sort of like, do I have safety? So survival is what we are seeing in the collective. All of this chaos in the collective is this struggle to move beyond a space of survival. And many people never do that in their human lifetime. And it's going to be harder and harder to live that way as we shift, because of the fact that so many of us want to shift. out of that survival mindset and into these more expanded spaces. So the second field, so this is very interesting. I'm going to interrupt myself. So there are 7 toroidal fields, very interesting, like the 7 chakras. There are 12 chakra frequencies, and these 7 fields are linked to like the 12 chakra frequencies. So Earth Star being the first chakra frequency, kind of its own field. Then the survival field being the second toroidal ring, like the smallest ring on the play school tower. That is from the root to the heart. So the second field goes from the sacrum to the throat. This is creativity. So when you are able to move out of survival, you move into creativity. How do I create my own reality? How do I create what I want to see in the world? How do I express myself? So creativity and expression are very linked. So this second field, the second biggest ring on the inverted play school tower, is creativity. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about any one of these yet. Like, we may do that in the future, but just to kind of keep things a little bit simple, yet not probably very brief, we're just going to kind of go through them. So we had the Earth Star, which was presence. We have survival from the root to the heart. Then we have creativity from the sacral to the throat. The next ring up on the play school tower is from the solar plexus to the third eye, and that is vision. So, do you have clear vision, and how are you supporting it? It's not just the vision, it's the action, it's the aligned action. That's why we're starting at our center of action, our center of personal power, and the vision has to be supported through aligned action. So then the next ring on the play school tower, the next toroidal field or toric field, is the heart to the crown. And this is knowing. So I'm coming from a space of love, and I'm receiving my own intuitive knowing. And that is, receiving is an act of love for yourself and for the world around you. So this knowing is about giving and receiving from a space of kind of open-heartedness and from a kind of a view beyond the ego. So the next field is, I have to move up a little at a time. Heart to crown. Okay, so then we're at throat to causal. The throat to the causal. So now we're getting into those 12 chakras. So this is what was missing when I originally did these activations through 2024. So the throat through the causal is being. Who am I being? And the causal is focused in the physical, like your human lifetimes, but the throat is a lot about your vocation. Who am I being? Who am I here to be? What is my purpose in this life? And that's linked to all your past lives, all of your other human lives. Then we've got the third eye linked to the soul star, and that one is called becoming. So, who am I becoming? So you have the seat of your soul at your soul star is differentiating out into all these different versions of, not just human, all these different quantum versions, all these different differentiations are to help your soul become. And like, what is it becoming? Originally, we differentiated out from source just to see what not source was. And we are creating what this whole reality is. And there is a journey back into source, but that's not the reason we're here. We're here to become whatever we want to be, whatever we choose to be, to become servants of unconditional love in these various, like, more physical and less physical differentiations of ourself. So then the next one is the crown to the stellar gate, and that is oneness. So when we move, and that is the biggest of these fields before we get to the base of the play school tower. So the widest of these fields is the oneness of remembering that everything is one, that we do all come from source, that we all are one unconditional love vibration, however differentiated out we have been. So this is this idea of embracing unity. So then the base of the Play School Tower itself is the divine gate, which is remembrance, remembering that you are a being of divine energy. And we have access to that all the time through the tube that comes down, which is that central column that connects all the way down to the base of our bodies. And then from there, we kind of spread into the earth through the Earth Star. So that's a lot of information. And we'll go into more depth on this, but I'm just going to reiterate that the reason this is coming in is to support our expansion. As somebody who holds a huge amount of space, it has been very hard on my body. This is where we're going here, okay? Most of the people who listen to me, who interact with me, who see me professionally, who are in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary, not everybody, but most of us have some sort of a chronic health condition. Hypermobility, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, any kind of chronic thing, neurodivergence, all of these things are actually evolutions, especially neurodivergence and hypermobility, because hypermobility allows us to hold more light in our physical body. The fascia that connects everything, that is the light body within the physical, it's stretchier. That's literally what hypermobility is. It gives us the ability to hold more light. And we have really been suffering over the last probably 50 or so years. And there's always a question about why this is happening. And is it diet? And is it chemicals? And is it this? And is it that? This is definitely a yes. And it's like, yes, all of that. And at the foundation of all physical things is a spiritual thing. And the spiritual thing here is that we have not had the spiritual support to hold this much light, this much energy in our physical bodies until now. I believe, this is just coming through now, this is a strong statement, but it's coming through. I believe that as these fields mature, because these are baby fields, as these fields mature over the next couple of generations, these chronic illnesses will go away because we will have the support in the quantum, in the energetic, to support the amount of light that we're trying to hold. And it's the same thing for neurodivergence. The more light you are linked to neurodivergently, the harder it is to be in a physical body. And you can listen to the telepathy tapes and listen to the non-speakers and see visual evidence of that, physical evidence of that. The non-speakers have telepathy. They have these gifts that are beyond what people believed could exist. And they have a really hard time being in a physical body because the body was not designed to hold that much light, that much energy. So if for no other reason than perhaps alleviating some of your chronic issues, working with these new fields is a step in that direction. I'm never going to guarantee anything. I don't know what's going to happen in the rest of my human lifetime. I don't know what's going to happen for the rest of the year. I just know that we have just been gifted these frequencies that are opening these fields that are really going to change the way we exist. I have been feeling very overwhelmed this year. And the more I work with these fields in just the last 2 to 3 weeks, the less difficult everything feels. And there's always nuance to that. And there's always more complexity. But in a very simplified way, these fields are here to make things easier for us. And just like anything else, we need to do the excavation, the expansion. I don't want to say work, but it is work. We need to do the intentional effort to explore these, to open these, to activate these. And that's what I'm going to be doing with the members of the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary, at least to start. So if you are enjoying the show, we would love to have you join us there. It's $22 a month at this point. There's always a link in the show notes. You get some exclusive discounts on activations, on one-on-one services. You get the activations that accompany these full episodes. You get the bonus episodes. And you get access to 2 different groups where you can interact with like-hearted people. And we are talking a lot about what is a 5D, what does a New Earth community look like? how do we exist in that community? How do we build those communities while we're still in this 3D system that is really difficult and not intended for us to succeed? So, and I've got someone here on my live who's saying, woohoo, we call it SAS, Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary. SAS is great. Join us. We would love to have you join us. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will see you on the next episode of Wind Down Wednesdays.